not going to say it in the microphone. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, can we start off with a vote to approve the agenda for tonight, March 10th, 2025? Okay, all in favor? Aye, we're unanimous. And can we get a motion to vote to approve the minutes from February 24th, 2025, the last meeting? Okay, all in favor? Aye, and we're unanimous again. Matt, you want to take this?
So just off the top, this is my conflict of interest statement. My wife is a teacher at Memorial. For budget discussions, this constitutes a conflict of interest. I've spoken with an ethics lawyer, state ethics lawyer in the past about exactly how I can and cannot participate in tonight's meeting, and that advice is that I cannot participate in any discussion regarding the line item of the budget that contains my wife's position or anything that affects her direct financial interests. In this case, that would be line 1000.2305.01.00.5, classroom teachers at Memorial, as well as section 5200, insurance for active employees. Provided I abstain from any such discussion, I have been advised I can fully participate in voting this evening.
Cool, thank you very much. All right, school committee chairperson comments. I don't have any comments tonight, so we can keep moving on. Let's see, we've got our student representatives here tonight. Any student comments? I can pass the microphone down. Oh, you got a mic, all right.
No? Okay, cool. So we recently had our 1X for the Drama Guild. Or no, that's a lie. We recently had our auditions for 1X for the Drama Guild. And me and my co-director are directing and are also hoping to introduce a lot of new things that the Guild has never seen before. A few spoilers, my sisters will be in it. And we're going to have some cameos and all kinds of cool lights. Furthermore, with our donation of $50,000 that we recently received, we are hoping to make some long-term improvements in the auditorium here, including things with the soundboard, lights, and even the stage. Senior Knockout is starting up soon, though it is not a school-sponsored event and will not be taking place on school grounds. It is something a lot of the students are excited about. National Honor Society induction is this Thursday, and our brand new National STEM Honor Society is also meeting tomorrow to discuss how Inspired Learning Day sessions went, future plans, and goals.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Next up, as part of new business, we've got a easement to vote on for 90 Pleasant Street, Upton easement, which is for the National Grid access at Nipmuc for the EV stations. There's been a copy of the easement that went around. There's a link to it. We're going to need to take a motion to vote and approve it tonight. Any questions or discussion on the easement? We did. We approved the MISCO one. This is just the Upton version for Nipmuc.
I move to approve granting the easement to
90 Pleasant Street.
90 Pleasant Street to the Massachusetts Electric Company for the purpose of installing an EV charging system.
Excellent. All right. Any other discussion? Questions? All right. All in favor? Aye. We're unanimous. Great. All right. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Cohen and Mr. J. Byer to discuss the proposed MURSD fiscal year 26 budget.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for those that are here tonight. And I know we are streaming on YouTube, so you should be able, hopefully we have lots of viewers at home, and that will be available online on our website as well. So tonight, thank you for the opportunity to have us give a full overview of our FY 2026 budget. As in previous years, if you've seen this before, Jay and I are going to walk through our presentation. I'm going to start in the first half. He's going to jump in on some of the financials, and then we'll come back together and help answer questions at the end. So our goals tonight, first, to provide an overview of our budget development process. We want to communicate a summary of our short-term and long-term budget priorities for the school district. We've actually had numerous presentations that have taken place in the last 2 months, which are all available on our website, but by all of our departments, and we'll be doing some highlights from that. We'll be presenting our proposed budget and the steps we've taken to balance the shortfall that we spoke about a couple weeks ago. And at the end, we'll identify some challenges and some remaining variables that are still going to be dealt with between now and the end of the year. So I always like to start at the beginning to give everyone a sense of who we are. Now, when I look at everyone in the room, many of us are from the school district here, but what's nice is for us to see our enrollment numbers every year, and we're actually consistent from this year to last year of 2,072 students, and we are 403 staff strong. That's not just teachers, which are some of our largest numbers of staff, but custodians and paraprofessionals, administrators, food service. I'm going to forget a group, but we have before and after care. We have lunch resets monitors. We have a whole lot of people that work in this organization. Every year since I've started to present here, I'd like to point out our trends that NESDEC does for us. They're an external organization that does enrollment projections. And we also, if you grab the budget book, you'll see I put a couple additional of their projections that are in there as well. The one I like is this one because it shows our historical enrollment and where they think we are right now and what our projected enrollment might be. And as we've been pointing out, we've had a dip in the last 10 years, and we're in that middle point, and it's actually was flat from last year to this year, and we anticipate over the next 10 years for it to grow by about 200 students. Now, whether or not that will happen, you never know. These are just projections, but we are seeing at the early grades, especially in Upton, that we're seeing some increase in class sizes and more students than we've had in the past. I also like to share, and just so you're aware, on the DESE website, there's a school profile page that offers everything that you can ever wanted to know or didn't know existed about school districts. And I like to pull just data about who the students are that are in our district, and we track the different subgroups and groups of students, and to see, how are we changing over the last decade. And over the last decade, we are becoming increasingly diverse, and we are in a situation where we're attending to all of our learners' needs, and we've seen a big increase in our English language learners, and also students whose first language is not English. And I give additional data, I think, in the budget book at the end. So if you want to look more into that. But what that brings is the need for more teachers and mandated services to meet the needs of all of our students. It wouldn't be a budget book or a budget presentation that I created without lots of pictures of our students, because I think sometimes we can get lost in our numbers as in our facts and just want to keep coming back to the reason why we're all here and what the investments are all about. And I also like to begin with our why. And I took these pictures just this past week on Inspired Learning Day. It was over at Memorial, and I was observing these students, and they were working with Spiro, and I think it was Debbie Coyle who was working with them. And it was amazing because I got to see on the left when they were testing the Spiro robot, and they were trying to get it over the ramp, and then you can see the next shot was their reaction on their right where they were thrilled, and then I couldn't capture it, it happened so fast, but then they jumped up and they started running around, yelling to the teacher and said, and to Mrs. Bell as well, and saying like, hey, you know, did you see what we did? We did it, we accomplished it, and we're showing everybody. And that is our why. We want that excitement, the kind of excitement we saw the other day in our classrooms, and that's why we have a really incredible strategic plan. We have our mission of bringing our vision to life, of empowering all learners to thrive. We have incredibly strong core beliefs about learning that are here. And I always like us to bring us back to our theory of action, of how our vision links to our actions. And our ultimate goal is to unleash the potential of each learner and enable them when they're leaving our district to be able to do anything. We have a 5-year strategic plan. We are in the second year of that, and it's driven by our 4 strategic priorities, which we turn into annual action plans and goals. Okay. And when I talk about it, I want to link those goals to our return on investments. And when we talk about return on investments, it doesn't always resonate in a school district, but anyone in a corporate America or business they understand what that means. But when we talk about return on investment, we're talking about our investment in providing the best learning environment that we can for our students. And I had to put this picture in here. So this also was on Inspired Learning Day, and the students were acting as reporters, and they were talking to Principal Bell, and they were asking her questions and doing a practice interview. And then on the right, they started to ask questions of the students about their portrait of a learner competencies and what they liked about Inspired Learning Day, and it was pretty incredible. Something else that I've had the last couple of years is to try to identify and give us a little bit of history of what we've been working on through the years. If you go all the way back to 2018, which I know is really hard for us to remember, or maybe we've blocked out some parts of those years with COVID, but that's when we had launched our last strategic plan. We had a lot of focus on innovation, also on social emotional learning. We were bringing in trauma-informed practices. And then COVID, and you can see what we needed to bring in a lot of additional supports. We had remote learning, recovery, and then a focus in our post-pandemic recovery was around building up multi-tiered systems of supports. And at that point, leading into 2023, was the launch of the strategic plan that we're in right now. And so as you look at some of the work, and I actually ran out of room to be able to identify and give some highlights of all the different things we've been doing over the course of the year, but you can see project-based learning is something we've been working on. We've been expanding Project Lead the Way curriculum over the course, going all the way back to about 2018, 2019. We also have been building on deeper learning strategies in the last few years. Something else we wanted to highlight this year in return on investments, to give you a couple snapshots related to achievement. We've been tracking some metrics, and Cheryl, our assistant superintendent, has been giving some presentations every year related to MCAS and iReady and other benchmarks and assessments that we've had. And if you look on the left, you can see some of the investments we put in around data inquiry and using open architects and iReady, as well as bringing in high-quality curriculum with Bridges and ST Math over the years, and then the strong use of tech integration and iPads to use some of these digital resources, that we've really seen a great increase of our students who met and exceeded state standards in math at the elementary, and we're seeing great growth as a result of our investments. Something else we've seen at the middle school this year in grade 5, we did a couple of things that were really targeted. We reallocated a position last year. We had a smaller enrollment coming through in the 8th grade. We reallocated a position to the 5th grade, where we wanted to make sure we had teams of teachers that were able to have less transitions for our students and work more collaboratively and reduce class size. And that's had a significant impact in the location of the building and some of their work. Add in formative assessments and iReady, and also piloting of MyView, which is a ELA high quality curriculum resource. and we've already seen some great increase right now in growth. This is a great, if you heard the whooshing, that's our HVAC that we will talk about later. I need to replace that. That was good timing. Next, if we jump over to Nipmuc, and there's always amazing things that we can talk about and highlight here, but one area we really wanted to highlight because it's been strategic work, and that's around our Innovation Career Pathways, or ICP for short. And we have brought in information computer science, business finance, business marketing, and we're looking at an ICP related to science. And although some of that is us applying for grants and receiving grants from the state, it also has been involves in strategic staffing, and also we are linking a lot of our work and doing a great job, and John and Marianne and the teachers have been really building the mastery learning record for our students that we've highlighted a lot at our school committee meetings, and we're excited that our students are working in that direction, that they'll have that by graduation. Next, we wanted to talk about some of the PD. We have district-wide deeper learning that PD that we've invested in over the last few years. For example, our middle school educators have been trained in PBL, and most students, as a result, in grades 5 through 8, will experience 2 PBL units, project-based units, this year. And I highlight, if you upper right-hand corner is one of our favorite ones. When they came in, they presented in the central office and did a Shark Tank for us, and it was just amazing how much I've seen the students grow and the project-based learning opportunities grow at the middle school after this PD. I mentioned our Project Lead the Way expansion. It started at the middle school years ago, and now it's been expanding into the high school and also in the elementary school. And you can see that at the end, we'd have elementary students experiencing 1 to 2 Project Lead the Way units. And our high school, the last number of years, has been focusing on leveling up authenticity and really have amazing opportunities for our students to have authentic learning experiences as a result of that strategic work. And a lot of that involves showcases of learning, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that it's not just in the classrooms, but all of the additional programs that we have that keeps kids in school and excites students in school. And so we have some highlights here of our athletics and art, and I ran out of room. I could have kept putting different items in there, but what we like to do sometimes, I know there's a fair amount of high school pictures here, but we like to highlight the journey of our students through the entire district and what they're able to experience by the end of that journey. So then that leads to budget development. All of that is what we want to continue to invest in and to grow. And I always start every budget presentation, which makes everybody laugh a little because I use this image so much, but I find it helpful because it's a visual of the fact that our budget development process takes place throughout the whole year. There's a lot that goes on in these couple of months, but actually we start this process of establishing calendars and timelines and goals early on in the year, and we continue to refine. We present now, and then as we finish out the end of the year, there are lots of changes that take place as well, and it's cyclical. The budget timeline, this presentation I will link on the website after we're done tonight, and all of these links that are up here for presentations are all available in the budget book through that or on the website, so if you missed any of the presentations, you'll be able to track our progress. So we have some guiding principles in the FY26 budget. First and foremost, when we make decisions, we ask the question, what is in the best interest of all of our students' needs? And we try to keep students at the forefront of our decision making. Secondly, we have been focused on maintaining level services and at times having some targeted investments. However, knowing the fiscal circumstance that we're in, with decreasing revenue, state and local revenue, we are really trying to be fiscal stewards, have transparent communications, and trying to balance our needs and growth, but also knowing that we have capital investments coming up and knowing that we want to collaboratively work with the towns and have our budget go as long as it can, that has been in the forefront of our thinking. Some of our goals are pretty similar to last year. We're always focusing on our high quality curriculum instruction for students. We want to make sure that we continue to have multi-tiered systems of support to support all of our students, and also to keep looking into the future and making sure that we're future ready and able to align to our strategic goals that I mentioned before. On this slide, I'm going to focus on the bottom of this, but the point of this slide is that there are numerous factors that go into and impact prioritization in a budget. We don't work in a vacuum. We work in 2 towns, a regional school district with constraints from the state, limited town revenue. We have some fixed costs that are, we hear from towns, they have health insurance going up by 18, 19%. Fortunately, I guess, ours is down around 9%, although that's pretty high. We have on the horizon a really strong likelihood of reduced federal funding coming in, especially with the possibility of the elimination of the Department of Education. Many of our federal funds come from there. And this year we'll talk about our need to increase the use of our reserves in order to meet the budget needs here. But we also want to balance with community expectations, our expectations and goals, and all of that comes together when we're trying to prioritize. I'm not going to read through all of this. You can look at it after, but I do ask that our schools and departments every year do what's called a SWOT analysis, where they focus on our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for change, and any external threats that we might be met with. And we have amazing, in the budget book, I add a little bit more about our strengths and some of our opportunities. But we have an amazing group of staff. Many of you are here tonight, amazing group of administrators. And I love working in this community and being in this community, and just consider myself really privileged and fortunate to be here, because we have really supportive communities, supportive parents, and a commitment to really strong strategic goals. But there's always areas for growth and areas that we are constantly looking to improve in. When we prioritize, I've been using this model for making decisions with our team. I call it the budget hierarchy, but we always start at maintaining level services. We never want to drop below that bottom line of reduced services. We're at least trying to maintain level services, and then we go up to see, what are some critical needs, mandated needs, and then what are some targeted strategic investments or programmatic enhancements, because really we want to be in that competitive range, and we're always striving to keep getting better and better. And so we want to invest across all of this, but we start at that base of maintenance. When all of the requests come in, there's a lot more that came in for requests, but I'd like to give some highlights on the left of staffing requests every year, and also some key resource requests. There are a lot more requests that came in from different departments, but just gives you a few examples. The 3 on the bottom are level services related to enrollment. I'll speak to that in a second. And then when we go into needs-based, we would be kind of moving up into that next category if we were able to add any additional staffing. One example is English language teacher. This definitely came up in a recent review that we need to look at an additional English language teacher. It also was something that was requested across from almost all of our schools. So it's right on the next of needs-based of how we can meet that. If we go over to the right-hand side of the resource requests, we'll talk about our smartboard projector replacement that, we're seeing if we can get a little bit in the budget, but a little maybe from some grants. We're still trying to work through, but we talked about this last year that our iPads we needed an additional $200,000 in the budget for a refresh of some of our iPads. And that's not in this current budget. It's been deferred for this year as well. So we're not quite getting to some of the needs that we have, but on the bottom, we still have some targeted textbooks that are required that we do have in the budget. So one thing we look at for budgetary considerations is enrollment. So when we're thinking of that bottom, maintaining level services, we do not have a mandated policy on class sizes. I know some districts have that, but we do have what we feel is best practices, and we try to adhere to this and try to, when we start to approach at the younger grade levels, we always want to target, kind of our pre-K and our K and our 1, and then we kind of go up there. And so our max preferred is around the 20, 22, 24, and it varies at the high school. And the reason why I say it varies at the high school, and I'm sure many of the high schools they understand this, is because it's student-based. They select courses, so sometimes you might have as high as 29, sometimes you might have as low as 7. It really can vary across. You can't average it out like you can in some of the grade levels. Wanted us to just take a sense, some people say, well, what are your class sizes? What are the average class sizes? So at Memorial and Clough and Misco, K to 8, you can see our class sizes, and we have Spanish immersion too, so it's not gonna be an even average across. I highlighted those that were approaching that 23, 24 mark. That was a little bit higher. You can see we have very decent class sizes right now in most of our places, and that is a priority, and that's what we've been trying to maintain, because we know that it's better for us to get to know our students and to work closely with them and to be able to not have overcrowded class sizes. We know all the impact for that. So one of the requests that came in was related to grade 8. We had a bubble of students coming through in grade 8, which was significantly lower, and they're heading up to the high school this coming year. Last year, because of some of the budgetary constraints, we ended up reallocating and moving some of our staff from that grade level and need to bring that back, because if we didn't, you can see that our average class size would go from 21 up to 29. And so therefore, that was one of our top priorities in our 8th grade in our budget. Another consideration that we monitor every year is our kindergarten enrollment. We do start kindergarten enrollment, I don't know, starting like February, right? I'm looking at my principals, yep. And, but you aren't required to enroll your child in February, right? We just start that process. So some can show up the day before the start of school or even the first week into school. So we do our best with those that do enroll to figure out, but we've been in situations where we had a sudden enrollment right over the summer and we needed to add a teacher that was unexpected. We do track it, but that's one of our largest variables that we have. All right, so that's my summary of a lot of the thoughts and background leading into where we are with developing the budget. Now Jay's going to come up and talk about some of the numbers related to expenditures, revenue, and then we'll...
You can take yours because you're going to flip the slides.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, you flip.
You don't want this?
No, I got this right here. You guys can hear me okay?
You want to flip it here?
Okay, I'll flip it there.
Sorry.
It sounds really nice.
Logistics, yeah.
I'm going to flip it.
Okay. You do it. You just hit the arrow.
Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about the money part now, which is everybody's favorite part of this budget process. So 2 weeks ago, we presented to the school committee, and at that time, we had a shortfall of almost $1.8 million. We have closed that shortfall now. We're going to explain to you how we did that and kind of what is driving this budget for this year. On the expenditure side, we always start out with my favorite pie chart. These are function codes that the state gives us. That's how they categorize school spending. So it just breaks it out by those categories. Instruction is the 2000 series of accounts. That includes teacher salaries, instructional supplies, technology. Administration it's all self-explanatory. I don't have to explain it to you. You're all smart people. If you look at our budget as we break it up, employee salaries and benefits amount to almost 77% of our budget. It means that the majority of our money goes towards the personnel that deliver instruction to our students. Supplies is a pretty small part. a smaller part. Maintenance and transportation are there, and then out-of-district tuition, which we always separate out. The key drivers for this year. Salaries are up about little under 1.4 million. That includes the three new positions that Maureen referenced. Right now, our health insurance is projected at a 9% rate increase. We're still working with them on that, but that's sort of where it's at this point. Lane changes, we highlighted it this year. Typically, in past years, lane changes have been about $40,000. So apparently, our teachers are taking classes that benefits them as far as instruction, but it was a fairly sizable impact on the budget this year. Transportation is under contract with Telstone & Sons. That's going up. Charter school tuition, you will see on the revenue side, we did get a bump in our reimbursement, but not as much as the tuition is going up, and we're required to pay the tuition for students that attend charter schools. Supplies, this is mostly the textbook series that we need to get. Most of our AP classes, my understanding is that after 10 or 11 years, they need to be replaced. I think we've already gone beyond that. And the Worcester retirement is actually a lot less than it has been. It's averaging $100,000 a year up until this year. It's a lot less this year, so that's a positive for us. As far as our salaries, teachers, ABAs, paraprofessionals, all of our instructional salaried employees amount to a little over $20 million. The support staff is a little over $1 million. Custodians, a little over $1 million. Administrators, a little under $2 million. The net increase in salaries is $1,316,000. Total salaries next year are projected at $25,883,163. We'll talk about health insurance quickly. It's everybody's favorite subject. I know we've had a really good experience with HPI this year. Luckily for us, last year we joined a joint purchasing group called the Mass Strategic Health Group. We hope to maintain our relationship with them. That board, of which I'm a member, we voted back in December or January, I forget which, to switch from HPI back to Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. So next year, your administrator, the person that's processing your claims, will be Harvard Pilgrim, which is what we had in previous years. NFP is a company we've worked with as our health insurance advisors for the last 20 or 25 years. They kind of handle all of the ins and outs. This year it's a company called Gallagher. When employees have contacted me with issues with their health insurance, that's who we contact, and they take it from there. There's no doubt that HPI has been kind of a disaster, and pretty much everybody is getting away from them at this point. So we're going to be back with Harvard Pilgrim next year, which I think is a positive thing. We are looking at about a 9% increase. Our loss ratio is hovering around 91%, which is higher than the optimal amount that they like to see. All right, revenue on the state side. Chapter 70, the governor's budget included a $75 student increase. We are a minimum aid district. That means that we have not completely met our foundation, our target share in both towns, and because we don't have a high population of low income and we're not an enrollment growing district, we get the minimum amount. But 75 is good because last year it was $30 in the governor's budget. Now, when it got to the end, it was $104 for the year, and we're still hoping that number is going to go up, but that's where it's at. Transportation is about a 12% increase. That's good because if you remember last year we had about a $150,000 reduction in our transportation reimbursement. And again, charter school, I referenced that it was a driver. We are getting $30,000 more in reimbursement, but our tuition is going up $57,000, so it doesn't quite meet it. But total state aid right now, as it stands, is $360,809. It's a little under 2.5%. The important thing to know here is that this is not final. We still have the House budget that's going to come out in April, the Senate budget, which comes out in late May or June. The governor is supposed to sign the budget by July 1. I don't think the governor's ever signed the budget by July 1. This past year, I believe it was August 1st. So we won't really have final numbers on this until just before school starts in the summer. If you look at our state aid, and what we've done here is we've looked from the previous override. The last override that was passed for operational expenses was for FY16. From FY16 to FY26, our state aid has increased on an annual rate of 1.25%. What you see there, CAGR, we talked about this last year, that's compound annual growth rate. That's sort of the rate of growth over that span of 11 years. So 1.25%, that's not a lot of money. And you can see it's just not a lot. Chapter 70, that's our main funding for foundation budget. That's gone up 0.71% in the last 11 years. So again, the state is pushing the burden for education on local communities, and we're not going to see anything on state aid. Even if we get another $30, $40 a student, you're not going to see that go up to even 1%. Transportation reimbursement. These are the reimbursement numbers that we get for regional transportation. Now, the state law says they're supposed to fund it at 100%, but there's a caveat in that it says always subject to appropriation. Well, they never appropriate 100%. Last year, we were down to just under 73%. This year, it looks like it's around 77%, but you can see back in FY21, we were at 96%. So that's a cost driver as well that's pushing the burden onto the local communities. This is Circuit Breaker. So Circuit Breaker is a program for special education for out-of-district placements. We're required to pay 4 times our per pupil average before they reimburse us for anything left. So the first $53,000, $54,000 we have to fund. Beyond that, they then reimburse us at a rate of around 75%, and they have kicked in transportation. That's why you see in 23, 24, and 25 substantially more money than previous years, because they're now doing transportation, or at least part of it. One of the things that concerns me, and you'll see it in your budget book, is this year the governor's budget for Circuit Breaker is less than last year. So we're not really sure what that's going to be for next year, but this number that you see for FY25 is what we will use to offset FY26, because we're a year ahead on that. This is the charter school. You can see the reimbursement rates there, and again, back in FY22, we were at almost 50%. FY26, right now, we're projected to be a little over 8%. So again, that becomes a driver. And there's not a ton of kids there, but we're spending about $360,000 a year on charter school tuition. On the local side, first, what's important here is you have to understand the enrollment percentages. We've been at that 44, 56% range for several years. There was a dip in 24, there's another dip in 26, so Mendon is only about 42%, Upton is a little under 58%. What that does is it shifts some of the burden onto one town from the other town. Now, how is it calculated? The way the local assessments are calculated is you first subtract your total budget from that, anything predetermined, meaning Chapter 70, transportation, charter school, any kind of state aid, the minimum local contributions, and then anything the district puts in from its own revenue sources. The balance that's left, that's what's split by that enrollment percentage, and that's a state law, and it's also in our regional agreement. If we look at the town of Upton, because Upton is the town that's kind of driving this year, you can see their minimum local contribution was up $631,000. That's a substantial increase for a town to absorb. That's probably about 80% of their new revenue growth for the year, and something that they would really struggle to try to fund on a full basis. Transportation, our regional agreement requires that the towns pay the cost of transportation outside of what we get for reimbursement. That operational additional is previous override money. It's funds that the towns provide to the district beyond what they're required to provide. In conversations with the town of Upton, they have agreed to get us a net increase right now of a little under $594,000, which is substantial. It's going to put a big strain on the town's budget because they also have services. But the key here is you have to see that minimum local contribution from Upton that's up $631,000. I'll show you why in a second. If you look at the growth rate of Upton since FY16, it's been about 2.6% as far as their assessments to the towns. Mendon, their minimum local contribution is only increasing by $120,000. So there's a big discrepancy between the $630,000 for Upton and the $120,000 for Mendon. Because of that, Upton not funding that $600,000, they're funding about $593,000. The net result of this is that Mendon is going to get a net increase of 0 next year. The reason for that is because Upton's increase first includes the minimum contribution and then the balance of everything else left by the split. Mendon is only up by $120,000 and the rest is balanced out. So it plays out this way. This happened a few years ago as well, but unfortunately this is where it's at. So Mendon's growth rate over the last 16 years has been a little under 1.6%. Now some of that's a result of Upton having more students than Mendon. Some of that is because Mendon has reached its target share, but Upton is still about 4% below its target share. So they're pushing Upton more, and they're pushing Mendon less. From the reserve side, from our district revenue, we always fund money from E&D, and we'll kind of go into a little bit about E&D in a second, but we're going to continue to fund $1 million out of our E&D. Now, E&D stands for excess and deficiency. In essence, it's the balance of all of our funds once we net out expenditures versus revenue. That shared tech position is something we have a collaborative position with the town of Upton for a tech position. They fund 50% of the cost of the salary and benefits for that employee. Transferring from revolving, we have several programs that make money for the school district. We've always transferred $150,000. One of the things we're going to have to do this year to keep this balance is increase that to $325,000. Currently, there's funds to do that. There won't be next year. Interest, you'll see there's a fairly big jump in interest. I called the bank about a year ago and complained because we were earning about 0.3% or 0.1% in interest. They bumped us up to 4%, and it has dramatically increased our interest revenue so that we can use that as a revenue source. Medicaid, it basically is level funded. That $71 is because that's the way we balance the budget when the state gives us our Chapter 70 and changes it in July and August, and we can't change the town's assessments at that point. We have to take it from somewhere else, so I took it out of Medicaid last year. But the total on the district side is about $270,000 increase in revenue, up to a little over $1.5 million. District funds, again, if you look over this period of time, we've gone up about 9%, but you're going to see a big jump again in the last 3 years. That has to do with us using reserve funds in order to get the budget by. All right, so the total budget for the year is up $1,224,000. You can see the various categories. Our total net increase right now in our budget is just under 3%. School choice, as you know, that's a fairly large revenue source for us. These are numbers, we got this chart from the state, and they kind of give us your numbers. Again, you can see if you look at FY25, we're at a fairly substantial split as far as choice out and choice in. Keep in mind, we always have to pay for choice out whether we're a choice district or not, so the choice in part offsets that. These numbers here are basically what we would call the offset of tuition versus our reimbursement. It's like your net earnings after it's all done. And you can see in FY25 right now we're projected to be about $725,000. Last year it was $568,000. So that is growing, but a lot of that has to do with us having a high-quality district, so people want to have their kids come to our district, and that's a positive, but it's a kind of a sweet spot as far as how many kids you take. You have to place them in the right place so that you don't overburden yourself or have to create positions in order to accommodate it. The school choice revolving account. These are the balances in the account over the last 16 years. You can see we started out about 1.2. We kind of fluctuated a little bit. But since the pandemic, that account has grown, and you can see in 24 we were up to just under $2.5 million. Right now, the projection, based on what we have to do for this year's budget, we're going to be down to just under $1.4 million. We have talked in the past, it's good financial practice in most places to have between 5 and 15% of your budget as reserve funds. We try to shoot for around 7 to 8% of our in reserve funds based, compared to our budget. Next year, I think we're going to be down in the 3.5%, 4%, which is really pushing it tight, but that's where it's going to be in order to get through this budget and make it work and accommodate the town's needs as well. E&D is another area that you look at, and you can see in the last 3 years we've been dipping more and more into E&D. Now, you see those jumps in 21 and 22. I mean, I hate to put it in these kind of terms, but the pandemic was very good to us because there was lots of federal money coming our way. We couldn't hire teachers, we couldn't hire paraprofessionals, our expenses were down. So therefore, we were able to save money, which is a good thing because it's helping us out for this last 2 or 3 years. Federal grants. These are the grants that Maureen was referencing. These are the amounts that we got this year in our federal grants. The top 2 are special ed grants. The bottom 4 are the title grants. And it's about $700,000. We won't know what we're going to get for FY26 until probably July or August. So again, it's quite late in the game when they finally tell us. But most of these have been pretty consistent. The concern is if the federal government does cut back on funding for some of these grants, this could have an impact on us. One of the things that we're dipping into for next year is the 240 fund grant, which is the IDEA entitlement grant. Because we almost got a year ahead in this, we were allowed to carry funds over. Grants are no longer one-year grants. They can be 2 to 3 year grants. We're going to carry over about $500,000, and right now we're estimating $500,000. So you can see this year it was $577. We've gone conservative on what we might get for next year. But it gives us about $1 million that we can invest into next year's budget from this 240 grant. The salaries that we're going to apply to it are just under that, so it's pretty close to using up the majority of that money in FY26. And keep in mind, when you see salaries that are allocated to school choice or to grants, they are not in the operational budget. They are funded directly out of those programs. So the question is, how do we close this gap? I mean, I've explained a little of it right now, but we'll go into it with a little bit of detail now. First of all, if you look at our budget over the last 16 years, it's gone up just slightly over 2.5%, 2.59%. So that's a fairly average growth, and I think we're probably in line with most other districts in that regard. As far as how we strategize this and balance this, did you want me to do this, or I can keep going? Okay. So one of the main ways is, you have two ways when you have a budget shortfall. You either decrease your spending or you increase your revenue. In this case, we are using one-time funds and reserve funds in order to get through FY26. That means additional choice money. We have generally been appropriating between $800,000 and $1 million a year from school choice. We are going to appropriate $1.4 million out of school choice for FY26. I just talked about the 240 grant. That's another source that we're going to do. We're also looking to reallocate some of our grant funds that we currently have to pre-purchase things for next year. For example, some of the textbooks that we need to buy at NITMUC so that we can take that out of next year's budget. We're basically using a lot of funds that we have in order to keep our budget in line with our revenue expenditure, or with our expenditures. As far as other ideas, we're looking at positions, we're looking at healthcare, we're looking at pretty much everything on the expenditure side. Most of you know I'm pretty picky about what we spend anyway. I don't always look at what we spend, but I try to keep ourselves lined up pretty well. But we're going to try to defer as many things as we can or pre-purchase them. All right, so balancing the budget. The increase in local aid, this is from 2 weeks ago when we were 1.7 million short. At that point, Upton had given us an net increase number of $350,000. They have agreed to go up to the 593. At least that's where they stand now. And again, this still has to be voted at a town meeting, and they could come back to us and say, hey, we hoped we could do it, but we can't. So that's a variable that's still there, but right now that's in the budget. Again, initially we had appropriated $800,000 from school choice. We went up to $1.4 million. That's a $600,000 increase. We originally had 5 positions that we had thought we were going to fund in the budget. We took 2 of those out, so now we're down to 3. Again, the grant there, that's the money from the grant that we're applying out of last year's budget that we're not spending this year, or I should say this year's current budget that we're not spending this year. We added $175,000 from our revolving accounts. We reduced some of our supply accounts, and then we tried to reallocate as many things as we could in order to get this balanced out. We're able to do this in FY26. We will not be able to do this in FY27 because we won't have the money unless we save a ton of money next year, but that hasn't been our trend over the last couple of years. So again, we reduced 5 to 3 as far as positions. We reduced supplies. We increased choice. This is basically the same kind of thing. The offsets, the variables that we still have. We're still hoping that Chapter 70 will go up to $100 a student, which would add another $30,000 there. Transportation could go up a little bit, and then we're still looking at staffing and things like that. Excuse me, it gets thirsty when you talk a lot.
You want to click the next slide?
Yep.
So I'll jump in here. So implications, what does it mean for next year? As we've mentioned a few times, hopefully, you've noticed we are going deeper into reserves to get us through this one last year, but we won't be able to do that level of usage for the next fiscal year. We talked about the 240 grant offset. We've been kind of maintaining it, but we're going to be using it for more of our special ed staffing for this coming school year. And also, as we continue to maintain level services, the level of maintenance is diminishing each year because we keep reducing a little bit in line items and targeting, but we do get to a point where you can't continue to do that, and it isn't actually level services. And I mentioned before that we put off some of our technology investments. We always look for outside ways to support our technology. We've had grants in the past. We're still looking, for different opportunities to help support those replacement cycles that we need to do. I'm looking at a lot of high school folks here. We know we can barely see our projectors, right? Like nod, yes. Yep. And I know at the elementary we have some smart boards that are going, and same thing at the middle school. So those projectors are going, and we are pushing our iPads out a little bit longer than we would like, and they tend to break a little bit more. So those are a few implications. Also, I don't think I mentioned it here, but we talked about how we have a lot of curriculum reviews going on. Next year is targeted for a replacement and upgrade of our ELA resources, and that is a significant cost, and but we're at the end of our subscriptions and our usage for that, and we've been reviewing, and they're continuing to review and pilot this year, so I know that's on the horizon as well. Can you want to go to the next one?
Yeah.
Yep. Someone mentioned this was kind of at one of our meetings, this was kind of like a snowplow, that as we defer and don't fill and hold off on things, or we have the many amazing suggestions that people come forward with that they'd like us to invest in that we haven't been able to meet within the budget. For example, adding classroom libraries at the middle school has been a request that's come in from our teachers I think it's been definitely the last 3 years. Busing for field trips. Our students our families pay for field trips, but we'd like to target, if that's part of what we do, we don't want students to have to pay for that. That's been a request that's been in there. We have musical instruments that are more expensive and have been in the budget requests for the last 5, 6, 7 years that we haven't been able to add in. And I do mention it here, the ELA materials that we know we're going to need to invest in the future. We also have requests that have come in from around student furniture replacements or lab tables or library furniture at the middle school as we are refreshing our middle school library. We have field maintenance where we know we need to invest a little bit more in our maintenance and irrigation and seeding, and haven't been able to increase it to the level that we would like. So there's a long list. And in staffing, just to point out just a couple in there, we have had tech support requests in our budget to add another tech support across the district for more than 5, 6, I'm going to track it in the future, but at least 5 years, because if you recall, when I had that chart, and we all know from the pandemic, we went from having maybe half of our district having devices to an entire district of students having devices. And in similar times, we reduced our tech staff and don't have as much support. And they are amazing, and many of them are here tonight, but we need more support. So that's one that's come up a lot. We also, many years ago, had to cut the library media specialist at the middle school, so that's been put into the budget for many years, and we haven't been so that's to make us more competitive with other school districts that have that, and we'd like to bring that back at some point. So there's a wide range of needs that we just keep pushing, and it keeps growing as we go year to year, and so I like the image of the snowplow effect to have us think about that too.
We will have no more snow this year, by the way. John, I see why you like the podiums, by the way. I can kind of get it now.
Yeah, we'll have to get you one.
All right, so remaining variables, things that we're still waiting for, we're not sure about. State funding is one, out-of-district tuition is another one. We've got a couple of kids that are out on evaluations. Health insurance is still there, enrollment is still there, kindergarten especially. School choice numbers haven't really solidified for next year. Facility needs, I always say, every day is a new experience when something goes wrong in a facility. Something stops working and we have to fix it. It seems like everything that we have to fix is $20,000 these days. So all these variables just sort of are sitting out there. But again, we've dealt with them in the past. We'll deal with them going forward into FY26. But like, we've referenced several times, we're dipping into our reserves to make this work. This is the fiscal cliff. Maureen, would you like to speak to the fiscal cliff?
I would love to. When going back in our presentations, the first time we showed this was in beyond FY24, and we knew we were going to start having the decrease, or the gap is getting larger every year. We know that this year, because we're going deeper into our reserves, it creates like a structural deficit. And we're saying this point right here, we are aware that that is being created in order for us to continue the service and level services that we have right now. Something else to have everyone know, in case you don't follow any of the state news and articles like I do, I get little Google alerts that tell me what's happening in other towns. If you look across the Commonwealth, they're calling it a perfect storm the last 2 years, where you have the decrease in all of the pandemic funding. You still have the continued needs we have after the pandemic, right? But we also have the growing fixed costs have gone up, inflation's gone up. We didn't talk at all about the out-of-district costs we have last year it went up by 14%, this year it's like 3%, next year they think it's going to be 3.7%. So we have these costs that are going up that we can't do anything about. And we pointed out the fact that, we've had the state revenue kind of at this level, and local revenue at this level, and it's all coming together. And so we try here to say, look, we're not just going year to year. We have been tracking this. We had earlier this year, we had a 5-year forecast done by an external consultant to say, hey, this is what it looks like you might need based of, some assumptions that you're working with. And we continue, we're really thankful. I see some people from the town boards in here, and I know some, we'll be meeting with some in future days, but we're really thankful of the collaborative approach that we've had the last number of years of trying to work through this, because it's not just the schools that are facing this. There are a lot of town needs as well that, we know, and we go to the meetings or hear about the meetings and talk to officials. So we're all in this together, but just want to note this, that we're also looking beyond this year as well.
Just to highlight this too, keep in mind that towns can only raise their revenue by 2.5% of their levy. The state, on the other hand, is pushing the cost of education to the local communities. Therefore, we're getting increases of like 1.5% on state aid. The towns just can't raise money just because they want to give it to the schools. It's kind of one of the issues with Prop 2.5 is it was designed back in the 80s when it passed. It may have made sense, but it may have outlived its usefulness now. But they're pushing the burden on the local towns, and they just can't do it. So we've been lucky enough that we've had reserve funds and been able to get through the last couple of years. But eventually that's going to go away. All right, we're going to talk very quickly. This is basically the budget part. We're going to go on to some of our capital needs, just because I'm sure everybody's heard we've got some capital projects coming forward this spring. They're focused on 3 main areas. The facilities themselves are aging. I know that's hard to believe when you look at Nipmuc. This building is actually almost 30 years old now. And when you leave, take a look at the carpet as you go out the way and look how high quality that carpet is. This carpet was put in 1996. So we've gotten our money's worth out of it, but I think it's had its day. The other issue we're looking at is safety and security. We're looking at door security, card access, alarm systems, things of that nature. And then we always focus on student learning as well and the impact of our facilities on student learning. And that plays into things like projectors and stuff. One project, we have been accepted into the MSBA program to replace the roof here at Nipmuc. I'm sure those of you that teach here at Nipmuc know all about the leaking roof. Go in the band room if you haven't seen it. There's a nice little bucket that catches the water there. We're into that program now, and that's a project that's coming forward. It has to be a separate project when the towns vote on it. It's going to require a vote at a town meeting and a vote at a ballot vote. It'll be a borrowing to replace the roof, and included in that is going to be replacing some of the HVAC equipment, like what you just heard earlier tonight, which is also 28 years old. Some of it doesn't work. It operates on parts that are not available. So that's one part of the phase of our projects going forward. The second part is building, just various building upgrades at all 4 schools. Something called building management systems. That's the computer system that controls the HVAC units, tells it when to turn on and off, tells when to do the air exchange so that it brings in fresh air from outside. It does all those things. I'm sure all of you know how, like, your room is 25 degrees and the room next door is 85 degrees. That's the reason why, is that system isn't working well. And again, we can't get parts to replace it or upgrade it at this point, so they need to be replaced. We're looking at wireless systems. We've got somebody looking into it. There's rebates through National Grid in order to do that. So originally we were quoted some really high prices for that. Those are coming down. The cogen, we call it, that would be the generator for Misco Hill that we're going to name after Maureen. Those of you that teach at Misco know that when the power goes out, everything goes out. And at a middle school, when you don't have bathrooms that work, that's usually a problem, and that's the case there. We'd like to get a generator. We are now looking at a variety of options. There may be a way to do a solar battery storage type generator that feeds back into the grid at other occasions, which would bring some money in. We're looking at key card security. We're looking at the paging time clock systems at all of the schools, which, as many of you know, don't work that well. The data cabling in this building was put in when the building was built, correct? Needs to be replaced with something that's actually out of the 21st century. If you go to some of the elementary schools, you'll see the curbs. When you walk in the buildings, they're just crumbling apart. The plows have been hitting them. Those become a safety issue when people are trying to walk across them. Sealants, window sealants, that's basically caulking at the elementary schools. It's more of an issue at Clough at Memorial. If you go up into the media center at Clough, you'll see some of the window sills on the inside have rotted out because so much water has come through. Lockers at Misco, anybody go down, I guess it's the 5th grade wing down in the basement, down past the bowling alley. Those lockers are really high quality lockers. We need to do something to make them at least not look so rusty. The bathrooms at Misco. Any of you teachers at Misco and goes into a student bathroom, keep in mind the building was renovated originally for a K through 5 building, so all of the toilets and the urinals are about a foot off the floor. Right, Bob, like that. Unfortunately, 8th grade boys are not 4 foot tall. And then flooring, we've done some flooring through grants at Misco in the past couple of years, but again, take a look at the carpet when you go out here. Most of the flooring in Misco and in this building were done when they renovated the buildings in the 90s. So that's the second phase. The third phase are the athletic fields. As many of you know, there's been a group working on upgrading the athletic field here, the football field, creating some walking paths. The softball field, I didn't know this because I never played softball here, but apparently when you're at bat, you're looking right into the sun, which is an advantage to pitchers, but it doesn't give you much hitting, and the left field fence, I guess, is about 100 feet. We're looking to reorient that so that there's a bigger field. The irrigation system out in those fields does not work. One of the things that was going to be part of this was a well. We did get a well successfully drilled last year, so we have a well. And then the fields at Misco, not the football field or the soccer field, whatever the field is up and back, that's in pretty good shape. The fields on the side, baseball and softball, are hard as a rock. They're dangerous. So we're looking to do some renovation there. We did get a grant, a state earmark last year to put in an irrigation system. We're still waiting for that money to actually come our way, but that's one piece that'll be funded through a grant. Cost for the projects for all 3. In total, it's about $30 million. The roof, we're estimating at around $8 million right now. That's going to be the total cost. The reimbursement from MSBA will be about 50%. So the actual cost to us will be about half that. The other facility stuff is averaging right now about $12 million. The athletic field work is about $10 million. We're refining our costs right now. We're still getting pricing. We need to bring these all to the Maytown meetings, so we're going to have numbers for these probably in the next couple of weeks. The MSBA project, they just assigned us a design team a week ago, which is going to make it difficult to get an accurate price, but we do have estimates based on the facility assessment, so we're going to have to use some of that and try to get some numbers together for the towns. And that would be it. You want your laptop back? Leave it plugged in or take it out? Okay. If you want to watch me fall, I can do that next.
All right, thank you, Maureen J. That was excellent. Well done, well delivered. At this point, as the chair, I'm going to go ahead and declare the opening of the budget hearing where the public is welcome to ask comments or ask questions or provide comments. If you're going to come up and speak, please do so at one of our 2 microphones. And I just ask that you say your name and which town you're from.
We should probably turn those mics on.
Details. Any questions, comments? All right, here, pass that microphone on, or I can.
I'm Flaherty from the Upton Finance Committee. Could you, let me preface my statement or question by saying, you never ask a question that you don't know the answer to, okay? So would Jay or Eric or Maureen explain to the people here how the minimum local contribution is arrived at?
Jay, I'm going to let you take this one. You're well versed in this.
Well, I think Paul asked it, so he must know the answer.
I do, but I'll bet you nobody
Yes.
else does.
All right, so the question is, how do they calculate your minimum local contribution? They look at each town's wealth, income, they look at property values, they look at your municipal revenue growth factor, and they look at your EQV, which is equalized value. So they take all of these calculations, they put them together in a little thing and shake them up, and then determine that a town can afford to pay more, or the other piece, and we didn't get into the details. This is echoing. You know what? You guys can hear me without this, right? I know, I feel like I'm rock and roll. All right. All right. Sam's, this one's on too. Okay. Target share. That's a percentage that they feel the town should be paying and the state should be paying. The state average is 59%, 41%, but for towns that they consider to be wealthy, the cap is 82.5%. Mendon and Upton are considered affluent communities. Therefore, they both have a target share of 82.5%. Mendon is at that point right now. Upton is at 78.5% or somewhere in that range. So they're about 4% below, which is why Upton got such a large minimum local contribution increase. But it's based on mainly property value and income level of the community, and that comes off tax returns, comes out of the assessments that the towns report to the state every year. 2 years back, yeah, that's true. They usually, everything that the state does, even, even the enrollment stuff, we report the enrollment on October 1, and that's what they use for enrollment projections. For the transportation reimbursement, they take what I report from FY24, and that's how they determine the FY26 cost. What they don't take into account, of course, is that the cost goes up from 24 to 26, so they don't quite keep pace with that. Did I do okay, Paul? Reasonably, yes. Reasonably, okay. That's the first time he said that to me.
But if I just,
No, you can get your own mic.
I know people don't really listen to this and care about it. 2 or 3 years ago, when houses in Upton were selling for 80 or 100,000 more than the assessed value, people were paying it. Now everybody else is paying for it because that's the driver of minimum local contribution.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate the question, comment. All right, why don't we do this? Why don't we, yeah, absolutely.
Maureen, you mentioned in your discussion that the perfect storm is happening to many communities across the state. And I just want to clarify for everyone that what our tactics were in spending the COVID money to make sure that people know that we weren't building any kind of structural costs in there.
Thank you for that question. We didn't plant that, but it's a good question. There were a lot of communities that, when they received the federal pandemic grants, used it for staffing. And so you may have heard of all, massive layoffs of staffing. We did not use our funds for that. We used it for more one-time purchases. We did do some facility upgrades, got some, flooring done at any of the floors at MISCO. We were able to do some of that, and a few of the locations in a little bit at the high school as well. And we also used it to support, the only position we used was to phase in over the 3 years the English language teacher. And that was the only position, so we used that to help us out with that. But we were careful. However, it did help us meet a lot of our additional needs, and we don't have that funding now.
Hi, Bob Clark, teacher at MISCO. A couple questions. One question was, how many additional school choice students does that $600,000 increase represent, and where will those students be allocated? That's the first. Sure. Yeah. How many students, additional students into the district, does that $600,000 increase in school choice represent? And then where will those new students be allocated?
Yeah.
Sure.
So the 600,000 is coming out of money that we've saved over the last 5 or 6 years. It's not necessarily coming out of next year's choice allocation. It's money that we already have in our account. So this year, if you go back, I'm trying to go back to there was a chart that had numbers. If I can find it here, I can give you the exact numbers. Here it is right here. So, for example, in FY23, we had 130 choice-in students. In FY24, we had 149. In FY25, we have 174. So we've had an increase this current year. That money we're taking in is what's going to be used for next year, because we don't know what the choice numbers are for next year.
Okay, so that's money that was received this year, but will be allocated to next year's budget. Okay. Okay.
So it's been built up over the number of years. We did have a little less students go out this past year and more come in. Something I didn't mention because he was doing that slide, but what I've tried to talk about, and I can pull up the slide, but essentially there was a point before, for numbers for school choice, there was a point before the pandemic that we were at about 165-ish, and then it dropped. What I've been trying to do is get back to that standard number, if we can, because if we have more of our own students coming in, we don't have spots and we don't fill them. So for example, back in the day at Memorial, we did have school choice openings, but because enrollment's been higher, we haven't been offering any school choice openings at Memorial the last couple of years. But we look at our numbers, so I know I have 9 students that are in the 12th grade in school choice. So if I wanted to keep a same about that number, I'd say, where do we have spots that we might be able to have 9 students, come in approximately to maintain the level.
Okay. I did have another question on the line item budgets in the section on functional paraprofessionals, 2330. Noticing large decreases at paraprofessionals, Memorial, and Clough, and 0 allocated for Nipmuc. Can you explain that, please?
Well, so that paraprofessional line is not special education, it's regular ed. The paraprofessionals at Clough and Memorial are kindergarten paraprofessionals. We've kind of gone to the conclusion that we can't use the 240 grant to fund them, so those salaries are being moved into the 240 grant, so that's why you see those reductions.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board tonight? We went a little bit out of order. I'll just make a quick comment on myself, and a number of others have been involved in the capital planning, have been involved in the budget process throughout the year. I just want to thank Jay and Maureen. It's been a very transparent process. We've had a lot of participation from both of the towns this year, which has been great. And, it's kind of a little bit of a hurry up and wait process, right? It's like you go so long, and then all of a sudden this data comes in at the last minute, and you're still waiting on a bunch of it. But I think the presentation that's been put together here tonight is very thorough and does a great job. And if there's a little puts and takes along the way, we'll be able to absorb it. And done a great job of carrying forward the dollars that we can out of the COVID funds, carrying the dollars out of school choice, et cetera. And a rainy day is coming, and we're using them, and then we'll have to prepare for the next steps from there. But thank you both for everything you've done here. It's been great. Any questions or comments from the board tonight? Okay. Kind of make one last call for questions from the public. All right. I guess at this point what we'll do is we'll go ahead and close the open session as part of the agenda that we have. And at this point, the school committee can look at certifying the fiscal year 26 budget. With that said, we took a little bit of a vote at the beginning of the night. We said the last board member to arrive would be reading the budget. And so, Carrie, it's your honor to take us through the motion if you'd like. Yes. One moment.
Is that working? Okay.
There we go. And Carrie, you can have the honor of reading all the motions, and we can do one vote at the end versus voting along the way.
Fantastic. As long as you don't make me stand up, because the floor is uneven, I'm afraid I'm going to fall. Okay. So I'd like to offer the following 6 motions for vote for the school committee, starting with motion number 1, to set the operational budget for the Mendon-Upton Regional School District for the 2025-2026 fiscal year at $42,170,584 that consists of general operations within the levy limit. Motion number 2, to assess the town of Mendon $11,046,828 that consists of the following: minimum local contribution at $8,861,322, non-discretionary charges at $787,501, discretionary charges at $1,398,005. Motion number 3, to assess the town of Upton $14,672,492 that consists of the following: minimum local contribution at $11,682,753, non-discretionary charges at $1,077,290, and discretionary charges at $1,912,449. Motion number 4, to appropriate $14,901,264 from state aid that consists of the following: Chapter 70 funds at $13,108,144, regional transportation reimbursement at $1,720,309, and charter school tuition reimbursement at $72,811. Motion number 5, to appropriate $1,550,000 from the following school district sources: Upton Shared Technology at $40,000, transfer in from revolving accounts at $325,000, Medicaid reimbursement at $85,000, E&D appropriation at $1 million, and interest at $100,000. Motion number 6, to appropriate $2,752,996 from the following non-operational revolving accounts: school choice at $1,400,000 and circuit breaker at $1,352,996.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, discussion? All right. We got a motion. It's seconded. All in favor? Aye. We're anonymous vote. Great. Thank you, Carrie. All right. With that, I think the last item we have on the agenda is any other matters not anticipated by the committee, since we posted 48 hours ago, and there are none. There's no new correspondence, and so with that, we can take a motion to adjourn at 8:19. All right, all in favor? And we are adjourned at 8:19. Thanks, everybody.